Good morning. Welcome to another Smart Knowledge U podcast. Today's February 12th, but I tend to record a lot of podcasts together and then release them over time. So I know there's actually a few that I recorded before that I want to release before this one. So hopefully by the time I release this one, on the day I release it, it will still be relevant. Or if I see things unfolding more quickly that necessitates release of this podcast earlier than I plan to release it, then I'll release it and upload it to my Smart Knowledge U YouTube channel earlier. So today I want to discuss why Deutsche Bank's struggles only marks the beginning. Because today, or at least today being February 12th, Deutsche Bank seems to be the bank that everyone is talking about. Will Deutsche Bank collapse due to the enormous amount of derivative contracts that it has on its balance sheets? But the reality is there are perhaps a dozen other global banks, if not even more, that will soon be in the same situation as Deutsche Bank, or that are likely even bankrupt today, where they're marking their assets to market instead of marking them to some fantasy valuation model where the regulators in their countries allow them to suspend all mark-to-market valuations and allow them to basically come up with fantasy valuations of their assets and their liabilities on the other side that allows them to appear solvent when in fact they are bankrupt. So in 2010, the total notional value, this is just 6 years ago, right, of all global over-the-counter derivatives was about 1.2 to 1.4 quadrillion dollars. So if you don't know what a quadrillion is, because it's such a large number, that's 1,000 trillion. So that means there's 1,200 to 1,400 trillion dollars in notional value of derivatives in the global system that presented massive systemic risk to the global banking system. Now, the Bank for International Settlements changed the valuation model for all global derivatives, and all of a sudden this valuation was cut in half from 1.4 quadrillion to just $700 trillion. A lot of people really actually don't even know that happened. So they just look at the numbers, they saw, it's going down to 700 trillion, 600 trillion, maybe 500 trillion, and they thought that banks actually got rid of a lot of the risk, but it was basically a counting trick, and they didn't get rid of the risk. So when the Bank for International Settlements was stating, look at this, all the risk is going down in the global banking system. We're down to just $500 trillion of derivative risk in the system. It's still really double that, a quadrillion. So if you like more details about any of the topics I'm going to discuss in today's podcast, then please just go to our website at www.smartknowledgeu.com and consider signing up for some of our subscription services, because there, I don't want to make all these videos hours and hours long, but there I discuss a lot of these topics more in depth and explain like what's really going on, how did they revalue it, what you should believe, what you should not believe about what's being presented by the mainstream media about this systemic risk in the system. So the much more in-depth and detailed explanation is reserved for my subscription members, like my platinum members, my crisis investment opportunities newsletter members. But on the surface level, this information should still remain very, very valuable to you if you understand what I'm saying. So let's continue. In any event, the reason central bankers have been reluctant to raise interest rates for nearly a decade now, and when they eventually did, when the U.S. Federal Reserve eventually did, it was a paltry 0.25%. And well beyond, that decade long where they did nothing, was well beyond a reasonable timeline for raising interest rates. It's because a great majority of those 1 quadrillion derivative contracts that I told you has exposure that's tied to interest rates. So this is why many central bankers have even gone NERP, which is negative interest rate policies, to protect banks from defaulting on their derivatives contracts, going belly up and causing a financial domino effect of disaster across the world. So in addition, as everyone knows, derivatives contracts are highly leveraged. So bank analysts always deride those that, like myself, that will discuss these 1.4 quadrillion notional amounts of these contracts, or $1 quadrillion dollar notional amounts of these contracts, because they say these notional amounts don't really represent real risk to the bank, because it's just the leveraged amount, and what you have to look at is the actual face value of these contracts, not the notional amount. So when, for example, when Deutsche Bank's share price plunged below the low share price it suffered during the global economic crisis in 2008, this was an indication of the fact that their derivative exposure was forcing this bank into bankruptcy. However, the Deutsche Bank CEO, John Cryan, came out and publicly stated the nonsense to all bank employees that, quote, "You can tell our clients that Deutsche Bank remains absolutely rock solid given our strong capital and risk position." But remember, I told you that that capital risk position is all based upon fantasy valuation numbers, not marked to market valuation. So it's all a bunch of nonsense. So, it's good to see that all bankers continue to shamelessly lie, not even to all their clients, but also to their own employees. Does anyone that can think for themselves, again, which is a theme of my last few podcasts, the ability to critically think, actually believe anything that any banker tells them today? I mean, if you look at the fact that Deutsche Bank's stock price has been cut in half very rapidly from $30 just in October 2015 to $15 in February 2016. Do people think that happened because it is rock solid, like CEO John Cryan said, And do you think that happened because it possesses strong capital and intelligently managed risk, like Cryan said? So this is my challenge to the Deutsche Bank CEO. If you're not a shameless liar, why don't you open up Deutsche Bank's books to independent, not state-sponsored, not banking industry-sponsored accountants, but independent forensic accountants outside of the banking system, outside of the government system, and let them issue an independent report that confirms your statement. Because if you do, they won't confirm your statement and they won't back you up, and they'll tell the world that Deutsche Bank has huge systemic risk, and that if central bankers don't bail them out, they're likely to collapse. So if he won't, then we know he's a bald-faced liar. And if he does, and he's found to be lying, or if Deutsche Bank eventually collapses in light of the comments he made that they're rock solid, and he's proven to be lying, does anyone in their right mind think that Cryan will be sent to jail for these shameless lies? Of course not, because everyone understands how corrupt this system is. So if you state that, you say, what? You can't be sent to jail for lying? Yes, you can, because people mistakenly believe that homemaker magnate Martha Stewart was sent to jail for insider trading. That is absolutely incorrect. Because in other words, in order to reduce her sentence, because an insider trading sentence would have been a much longer sentence, they convicted Martha Stewart of perjury, of lying before Congress. So that's what she was sent to jail for, was lying. So let's bring John Cryan before the German parliament, have him testify, and he's later proven to be lying about Deutsche Bank's rock solid financial position. Let's send him to jail for a very long time. And in any event, other banks, other big global banks, are very likely to be in similar desperate straits as Deutsche Bank. And although U.S. central banks seem to have more tricks up their sleeve to keep U.S. banks afloat for a longer period of time than apparently the European Central Bank does to prop European banks up, are Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Morgan Stanley really any different than Deutsche Bank? I mean, Deutsche Bank may have more derivative exposure, may have more risk, but I'm saying, are they any really different? That all of these banks have great systemic risk that put them in danger of bankruptcy as well. So it's likely that even if central bankers force citizens to bail out Deutsche Bank, this is what had happened in 2008. Taxpayers and future generations of taxpayers all around the world were forced to bail out European banks and American banks. That even if central bankers are able to put out the singular fire of Deutsche Bank presenting systemic danger to the entire global banking system. There are going to be multiple other fires that keep popping up all around the world in regard to the ongoing viability of other large systemically important banks, the G-SIBs, and I don't believe that every single one of these fires can be put out. So that is the real danger that we have going forward. So the takeaway from this is I think there are 4 points to take away, okay? So the severity of the problems, number one, the severity of problems that Deutsche Bank is experiencing is not isolated, even though that's how the mass media is presenting it today. The focus has all been about all the problems Deutsche Bank is facing in early 2016, in February 2016, but that is not the case. A lot of other global banks have the same systemic risk. Okay, number 2, even though Deutsche Bank's problems combined with plunging stock markets all around the world in Japan, like the Nikkei 225, China, the Shanghai Composite, the US, the S&P 500, the Dow Jones, and across Europe to open 2016 has caused gold and silver to increase very rapidly. It's not like gold and silver prices are yet on fire and anywhere close to where they should be priced in US dollars, where a free market in effect. So we can only conclude that a free market, despite the very strong and encouraging rise, we can only conclude that a free market pricing system is not in effect, and that the systemic bank and price suppression schemes against gold and silver are still in effect. So, gold is not even 1,300 at this point, though by the time I release it, maybe it will be. Silver is still incredibly under $16 on February 12, 2016, even though we're undergoing right now the largest global systemic risk in banking since 2008. So that's number 2. 3, don't expect the bankers to just roll over in regard to their desire to keep the Ponzi fiat currency scheme alive. Nothing goes straight up, and that includes even gold and silver, though. A lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon now, and even though long-term gold and silver are going to continue to rise and rise very significantly due to their extreme undervaluation from 2011 to 2015, but this is what I'm going to say, nothing goes straight up. There will be huge bouts of volatility in gold and silver prices on this ride up, and as a result of this banker fight to keep their Ponzi scheme alive. So prepare for these bouts of volatility by locking in profits on the way up. Don't get too greedy, because if you get too greedy, there are going to be strong bouts of volatility where a lot of your profits can disappear very quickly. Number 4, the global banking turmoil that we are witnessing now means that all those that have been warning of exactly the developments that we are witnessing today and the turmoil that we're seeing across the global banking system in 2016 have been correct in the past. Even though they're ridiculed, pushed to the side, and marginalized, today proves that they have been correct. Where many have not been spot on is in the timing of their predictions, as many expected the events that are now manifesting to have happened in 2013 or 2014 and last year in 2015. But because they didn't happen, people are saying, look at these fools who keep saying there's so much risk in the banking system. I don't see it, because our president is saying our banking system is rock solid. The banking executives are saying that. I don't believe them. But this is where we have to really come to terms with reality. Situations that we're seeing to open up 2016, they do not happen overnight. They happen over years. So that means those that have been saying that risk was in the system in 2013, 14, and 15 were correct all along. The manifestations of that risk coming home to roost just because it did not start until 2016 doesn't mean it did not exist. It had to have existed back then, because these type of situations do not happen overnight. So this is why I've said, even in previous podcasts, pay no attention to the timing of these predictions when people say it. But there's a lot of intelligent, really solid information in people that have been warning people about all this global banking risk that's going on. That's what you have to listen to. Forget about, price of gold going to $2,000 by this date, and because it doesn't happen, just like I said, you always have to push aside those exact timing predictions, but listen to the meat of the argument, because that's where you're going to basically be able to glean away important points that are going to help you in the future. Okay, so in conclusion, the biggest, I think, takeaway point from today's podcast is to understand that the risk to Deutsche Bank is not isolated, even though that's what the people in power want you to believe today. The risk is huge across many dozens of big global banks, and these fires are going to rise simultaneously or one after another, and they're not going to be able to be put out. And if they are, the most likely form of those in control, those in power, trying to put out these fires is seizure of assets within the bank. So understand that there's going to be great risk to assets left in a lot of these big global banks. So don't forget to subscribe if you have not already subscribed to our Smart Knowledge U channel by clicking the subscribe button below. And please let us know if you agree or disagree that we can only remain a victim of the modern banking system by failing to critically think for ourselves and to understand the knowledge that many good people are putting out there for free today. That we cannot marginalize something and push it aside because it goes against the grain of what the mainstream media is saying and because we don't understand it. Rather, we need to keep digging until we do understand it. And then when we do understand, we need to pass it on to everyone we know. So knowledge is power. A lot of people say it doesn't matter because you can't make a difference, but if everyone becomes aware and unites and basically doesn't fall victim to the divisive tactics that bankers are trying to employ against us, these nationalistic, patriotic, anti-refugee, pro-war mindsets that they're trying to get us to adopt, to be distracted from the truth and reality of who is really causing these problems, which are these central bankers, then we can win this battle. So as always, don't forget to also visit our website at smartknowledgeu.com and sign up for our free newsletter there, because we will present from time to time loads of great free information on our newsletter as well. So until next time, remain intensely curious. Thanks for watching, and so long.